Hello, and welcome to SCG Global Spin. Your moderator today is Celeste Bruce. Celeste is a partner at Rifkin Weiner Livingston and is co-chair of the firm's complex civil and commercial litigation practice. Joining Celeste is Norm Snyder. Norm is the managing partner and chair of Taylor McCaffrey and has extensive corporate finance and securities law experience. We also have Charles Vernon. Charles is the managing partner of Vernon David and specializes in mergers and acquisitions, real estate transactions, and corporate finance. Finally, we have Sherry Young. Sherry is a founder of the firm Rath, Young & Pignatelli and heads the firm's environmental practice group.
So good morning. All firms, no matter their geographical location, size, or practice, are confronted with questions regarding recruiting, retention, and motivation of attorneys. These issues have become particularly acute during the global pandemic. Today, we are fortunate enough to have three experienced and highly respected current or former managing partners from three SCG member law firms to chat about how their firms are navigating the new normal. Sherry Young, one of the founding partners and former managing partner of the New Hampshire member firm, holds the distinction of being the first woman elected chairperson of SCG Legal. Sherry, I wanted to address the first question to you and talk a little bit about how your firm is faring in the pandemic and what you all are doing specifically with an eye towards recruiting.
Sure, thanks, Celeste. Our firm is actually doing surprisingly well. We anticipated a significant slowdown based on the pandemic and the effect it's had on a lot of businesses, but some areas of practice have slowed considerably. Litigation is one of them. The courts were closed for quite a while and they're just reopening and things are slow there. But other areas of practice, especially our alternative energy, environmental and tax, seem to be strong, and healthcare has continued on strong. So overall, with the balance, the firm is doing well. In terms of our challenges, we have we're all remote pretty much. We are now, people are coming into the office one day a week. So 20% of the firm comes in one day a week, but basically we're all working remote. And for the first 5 months of the pandemic, everybody was remote. We weren't even coming in. So it's been a challenge that way. And so recruiting, for example, I'll just jump into that one piece for a minute. I was personally hiring another environmental attorney to work with me in our practice area, and had looked at a candidate from Boston who was great. But when I learned that he wasn't going to relocate to Concord, New Hampshire, which is where we are, and he would be facing an hour commute each way, I said, no, this isn't going to work. And then 5 months or 6 months into the pandemic, when we're all working remotely, I said, wait a minute, let's rethink this. And we took another look at this fellow. We met remotely with him. And finally, we did have an in-person meeting in a large conference room with a few of the hiring committee. And we extended an offer. So he's been working almost exclusively remotely. He comes in now and then to the office, and that has worked out really well. So our view of who we can hire, where they are, and whether it will work has certainly changed based on the pandemic.
So Norm is from our Manitoba member firm up in Canada and is the managing partner and chairman. So right before the pandemic, Norm sent everybody home. You oversaw the relocation of your offices in Canada. So tell me how things have changed for you guys now that you have these beautiful new offices nobody's using, and how recruiting is going for you guys.
Good morning, Celeste. Yes, you're absolutely right. So we moved into our new premises just over a year ago. So it would have been right around Labor Day last year. We're just getting started in sort of figuring out how we were using the new space. It had been completely redesigned, refitted, and then all of a sudden 2020 hit. like Sherry, we feared the worst, but we've been pleasantly surprised at how well the firm's managed and how well things have been going. And I think a lot of that, and I suspect most firms that are doing well have the same experience, that I've been really happy to see how our lawyers have adapted, how our staff have adapted. I think the people who are able to say, let's figure out how we can work within this, are the ones that are doing well. But we have been shut down in terms of not open to the public since March. Like Sherry, we're trying to reduce the numbers. We're not completely remote. Completely remote. We have staff coming in on a schedule of every third day, so that we've divided that out, and we've encouraged the lawyers to work remotely. So we're about 50% capacity at the most on any day in the office. Um, and interestingly, on the recruiting side, we have still been very active on that, and I would have thought that that might not have been the case, but it has been. Where we've changed on that is that I think our recruiting is much more strategic now, in that we're looking at specific areas where we could use help, and not so much developing completely new practice areas, but what I've found is our practice groups have looked at what they're doing, and within each group, they've found different sort of niche areas or different areas that they could adapt and focus on, just given the changing times. And so that's worked well. We hired a couple of new associates over the last 6 months. One who came from out of province, so we had the challenge of getting him here and having him self-isolate before he started work, figuring out how we were going to do that. And interviewing is done through Zoom and a lot of video conferencing like this, which has worked well. So we feel that we've adapted fairly well to that, and are happy with the way things are working out. As happy as you can be in these circumstances, I guess, is a better way to put it.
So Charles Vernon comes to us from the SCG's Romania firm, and he is also a managing partner of that firm. So Charles, tell us how you all are faring, Romania is faring, and has recruiting changed markedly for you all?
Yeah, Romania is, we're doing okay. It's a little bit different in Europe. I think that when we were talking about doing this, I was mentioning that Romania has not done very well during the pandemic by European standards. But I always compare it to my hometown of Orlando, and we are a third of the cases that they are in Orlando. I mean, we do a lot better here, I think, than a lot of people in North America are doing. But we're still, very concerned about it here. In fact, we're currently under a red alert, which means they re-closed down Bucharest. Restaurants have been closed except for outdoors. Schools have been closed. They've really started re-shutting down Bucharest recently. So we're under this. We have this for another 14 days. So that's always cheerful to try to work around. But overall, we've been doing okay. We've always traveled a lot as a law firm. Lawyers did. We had a lot of capabilities of working from home, and people did. We've kind of beefed that up a little bit. But we didn't really notice much when we decided to work from home and gave people the opportunity to do that. We did notice after a month or two of that people were getting a little wonky in their homes. We thought it was important that they get out more. And so we shifted into a half on, half off. We have 2 weeks on for half the firm and then 2 weeks off for the half the firm. So that we have a couple weeks where half the firm is in, we have the office with people in it. We work together. We did this in a matter of teams. And we found that's worked really well for us. The reason for 2 weeks, well, we thought if there was a case or somebody came down with COVID, that the 2 week period would allow enough time for people to isolate. We've been fairly strict with the teams, although people do have to come into the office like litigators to print documents and do filings. But we've been doing okay with this. We think our 2 on, 2 off works pretty well for us. We have a fairly large office with a big garden, so we have a lot of outdoor capability. So we've been able to have, meet people outside. We have meetings outside in the garden. That's been very helpful for us as well, just by our circumstances. We have offices also in the Republic of Moldova. Moldova is doing worse than Romania is. So we've been a little more careful there. The office has been working pretty much on and off since March, but they're very busy. We haven't seen a downturn in the work. As we were saying earlier, I was worried that work would dry up, but it hasn't. We are actually looking for people in Moldova. We're trying to recruit them. We're finding that to be a bit of a challenge. We're not sure why. We're not sure if people are worried about moving or what the issue is, but we're finding it a bit challenging, but we think we'll manage that. I know that we've talked before, but we would probably, would probably have some online meetings, but we probably want to meet people in some safe way, face to face. We think that's going to be important. We think the same way here in Bucharest, that we're going to want to meet people face to face. As I said, we have the ability to do that outdoors. We have a large area. We also have large conference room areas in our office, so we can socially distance as needed. But we're probably going to still do a lot of face-to-face stuff in our recruiting activities. Now, of course, it's the fall. We usually recruit law students. The problem is all the schools are closed, so there are no more law schools open. That's a bit of a damper. That's kind of hard to manage when there's nobody here. But we're slowly working through it. And so far, so good. It's been okay for us. The one thing I think that we found is that when we broke up, we divided into smaller teams where all the partners had a small team that they touch base with. We found it was really helpful to have regular contact with all our people. We were really worried about people getting a little, like I said, war weary, getting a little stir crazy. And so we were quite concerned about that for the first 3 or 4 months. We did see a little of that. We've really encouraged people to get more exercise and do things, get out of the house regularly for exercise reasons, for fresh air. And we've seen that's kind of worked. What that has done, however, is that I talk a lot more to people in the firm than I did as a normal managing attorney. I usually was in my office working, talk to my partners. But I've had a lot of contact with juniors, particularly, and younger associates, and I've really enjoyed it. In fact, it's really been sort of really good for me. I've enjoyed talking to all the younger lawyers and talking about their issues and problems, and so in some ways, it's been better in some ways than it was before.
So Sherry, picking up on what Charles was saying, how is your firm and you with mentoring of younger attorneys, how are you handling working at home, burnout, fatigue? Everyone is in the same environment all the time. How are you guys working with that?
Well, we have a little more flexibility, I think, in terms of anyone who would like to or prefers to come into the office to work can do so, even though we've broken people up into 1 day a week segments. We found that there are some attorneys with young children at home that they find it easier to actually come into the office and work just because it's quieter and they can focus a little better. So we've allowed for that. But again, for the most part, the majority are working remotely on a regular basis. And so, focusing on what Chuck had talked about in terms of trying to keep people connected, we've always had regular monthly non-shareholder meetings. So the government relations professionals, all the billing professionals come together. Shareholders are certainly invited, but it's a focus on the non-shareholder group who we get an update from the president. I'm no longer president, who gives an update on what's going on in the firm, people coming, people leaving, any issues or concerns that we want to make sure everyone's aware of. And then we have somebody do a presentation on a topic of interest to them. And we actually focus a lot on the younger associates in particular and getting them to present to a group on a topic that they've either a matter that they've worked on or something that they are interested in becoming, having more expertise in. we found those monthly meetings, and it's by Zoom. Now it has been since March, but we found that those meetings help connect folks together and keep us in communication and better connection. So that has actually worked out. It's not ideal. It would be much nicer to be in person, and we usually always have food around those meetings. So we'd have lunch. We found you feed them, they will come. But it works out okay. It still is working out pretty well. It's a good alternative to connecting in person.
Are you encouraging attorneys to take vacation, time off, use their days? I mean, it's a little hard in this environment, but are you all encouraging that?
Yes, we always have. We feel that, frankly, we live in Concord, New Hampshire, which is New Hampshire's a fairly rural state, and people who come here, in large part, come here for quality of life and home life and family life. We do very well recruiting from attorneys from bigger cities that have children and want to have a little more time for families. So we've always been very family oriented. We've always really encouraged all of our staff to take the time that they have off. And it's fairly generous for all the attorneys. It's 4 weeks. And for staff, it starts at 2 or 3 and moves to 4 after a certain number of years. So basically people get a month off plus all the holidays, which are, I think, about 11. And we want people to take that time off.
So Norm, what are you guys doing to deal with this at-home fatigue or burnout, if you will? Lawyers, we're now on a 24-hour clock, more so than we ever were. It doesn't really feel like there's any dividing time between days of the week, let alone weekends. So how are you all dealing with that in order to ensure, at the end, when we do see light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully it's not the train, it's, you bring people back and you're going to have functioning, healthy, mentally prepared lawyers back in the office?
Well, I mean, for a start, we don't anticipate that we're going to ever get back to the way things were. It's going to be a new normal, I think. And I think that new normal is going to involve allowing people more flexibility to work from home, and not only allowing it, but encouraging it. But as Sherry was talking about, the vacation time, for instance. So we haven't expressly gone out and said to people, make sure you're taking your time off. But what I think has come out of this, which is a really good thing, is the number of times I find myself asking, "How are you doing?" or "What can we do to help you?" And that should have been happening all the time with all of our lawyers. But I think this has encouraged us to do that a little more. And if anything, made that conversation a little more comfortable and easy to have. As an example, we do regular reviews with our associates. With our partners, it's more of a check-in on how they're doing from time to time. We have regular partners meetings. But I've found that with everything that's been happening, it's a lot easier for me as a managing partner to go to my partners, for instance, and say, how are things going? Like, how's your practice? Do you need some help? What are some of the challenges you're facing? And I know when we were chatting once before, I made the comment that in years past, to give somebody a call and have that conversation with one of your partners could be a little bit traumatic for them. It's like, what did I do? What's the issue? Whereas I find now people are much more open to having that discussion about, hey, thanks for asking. Here's how I'm trying to adapt, or here's what my challenge is. So a big part of it, I think, is listening to each person and figuring out what you need to do for each of those, for each lawyer individually and personally. Because, as Sherry mentioned, we've got some young lawyers who are, both parents working with young kids at home, and their challenges are completely different than my challenges with a house with just my wife and I and lots of rooms that we can work in quietly. So you need to look at what each person is doing on that. And I think that's the real challenge going forward that we've got to figure out how to deal with is connecting with each person and finding out what they need. Because as I say, I think when we get further down the road, we're going to see that somebody who's worked productively and worked well, who says, why can't I continue to work this way, has a pretty good argument on that. But our fear, I think, is the same as everyone's, that what we lose in the meantime is that personal connection, face to face, where you can check up on people. And with young associates especially, it's the opportunity to mentor and to work with them, where I think if you see somebody every day, you can identify a little quicker whether they're struggling, whether they have, whether they're under stress, whether they need more work or supervision. It's a little harder to do that when you're calling and you're having Zoom meetings, and maybe you're only seeing that person once or twice in person a week. So I think overall it's going to take us more work to really make sure we're asking the right questions and finding answers for people.
So Chuck, what are you guys doing? I know you said that you're working in teams that come in and you're together. So how are you handling, how's Vernon David dealing with young people and trying to mentor them? I mean, you're getting a little more face time than maybe some others, but still they're not there every day, right? Like you're not with these folks every day. And I'll be honest. I mean, sometimes I sit back and I think I don't even know what my people have done for the week. Like, and that's that's my fault, right? Like I just haven't reached out enough. But I find myself, I get to Friday and I'm like, okay, what did they do all week? And then I have to go back and try to put that back together. So I'm just curious, how are you guys handling, the mentoring of younger talent and ensuring that you're keeping track of and making sure they're doing okay?
Well, it's interesting. I think that because of this, we've gotten into better habits than we had when everybody was actually in the office. For instance, we have workload meetings every week where we get together and everybody talks about what they're doing. We find that we've been a lot more disciplined about those meetings. We've been a lot more focused on what's going on. I have one of my partners that makes notes every week, and then the next week asks, "Oh, you said you're working on this. Have you finished?" She follows up with everybody about what they're saying they're doing, which is really nice. And so I think people are beginning to we're more engaged than we were, because when we were all in the office, it was easy to sort of be like, "Hey, how you doing?" A little more informal about it. We've had to be a little bit more conscious of what we're doing with the lawyers. Like I said, I've had a lot more contact with the junior lawyers than I've had in years. I've enjoyed it. I'm not sure they have, but I've certainly enjoyed it. And it certainly is fun to see kind of what they're doing and how they're thinking about things. We make a conscious effort to mentor people with partners. For instance, we rotate people through every department of our law firm. So if you work for us, you have to work for everybody. Even if you're sort of a corporate lawyer or a litigator, we find that understanding how we do contracts and doing contract negotiations helps the litigators better understand why we're having these disputes. So, a little bit of labor work helps when the M&A guys are doing these big deals and they realize, God, we have this labor element because the EU law requires certain things. So we request everybody work all the way around with everybody for specifically this purpose of their development. We think it's just better for them to be overall a better lawyer at the end of the process. We also, we run a kind of a Western style law firm here in Bucharest, but that is not the case with most law firms in the country. And so what we do find when people come to join us, it takes a while for them to get used to how we do things, how we write a memo, how we question, have a lot of questions, how we have to footnote every fact or law or statement. I mean, you'd be amazed at how much time it takes for somebody to get used to being in this environment. And so part of this is that we tell people right up front, look, we really, have an expectation that it's going to be 3 months before you're really firing on all cylinders, and maybe even 6 months. We're here to help you achieve that and be better. And once you've gone through our process, I think that you'll find that you're more thoughtful about how you do things. So we've already had that in place for years, but now because we're separate, we have to make a much more conscious effort to keep in touch, to monitor them, and to make sure that we're tracking how people are doing. So I think in some ways we've kind of been a lot better. It's interesting too, because I've also included a lot more associates in my group. So I have one of the bigger groups, and we touch base at least 3 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week. I talk to my whole team and see what they're up to. And we, a lot of times we are talking about more casual things and just what's going on in the office. How's life? What's going on in politics. Everybody's always curious about the U.S. elections here. I mean, believe it or not, it's the biggest topic of conversation in Romania. It's about the U.S. elections. So there's always these sort of things that are going on, and we really try to engage people. And we think that actually, when this is all done, I disagree a little bit with Norm. I think that we're going to go back to pretty much what we were like after this is over. I think we're going to get everybody back in the office. We've always had a lot of office functions. We've always had a lot of interaction with each other, Christmas parties. We threw charity events. We've done a lot of social things, and we'll probably go back to that. I don't think we're going to have a new normal. I think we'll go back. The question for us is how long? Are we going to go back to what we were before in 6 months, a year? That's really a good question for us, and it's one that we're trying to figure out right now. Is how long it will take us, and of course that leads to all sorts of administrative issues. Do we need as big an office, for instance? Should we downsize the office and focus the office on something more like protocol offices, where we have a nice place for meeting and things like this, but people work and we hotel it in a smaller space maybe. We did that when I was working for an accounting firm. We hoteled it. You sat down wherever there was an open seat. That's really a good question. I think we're going to go back to it. I think we're going to go back to normal reasonably quickly by next summer, next fall. But of course, I could be dead wrong about all of this, and we'll have to play it by ear. But I think it's going to be interesting for all of us. But I think we'll go back to fairly normal. And I think the things that we've done, that we're happy with the way we've done things because of the quarantine, I think we're going to incorporate those moving forward. And I think we'll be a better firm at the end of the day, to be honest.
So have you guys found that retaining talent has become more an issue now, or less of an issue because people are less likely to move around? And if what you're, tell me what you're seeing, and then also tell me how you're dealing with it, because retaining talent also comes with motivation. So like you were talking about, Norm, with you have 2 parents at home working. If they're both trying to decide how are we going to navigate this, even if it is just another 6-12 months, however long it may be, are you worried about losing the lawyers? And I guess I just throw that out there to you guys to see how you're thinking about that as we kind of wind our way through this pandemic.
We certainly, I look at it and think we've done lateral hires, and there have been people out there that were looking to move, that we've looked at, talked to. So clearly, if it's happening elsewhere, it's a reason for us to be concerned that it might be happening for us as well. Our sense of it is that there are people looking and moving because they've had to adapt the way they practice. And for some lawyers, it's been adapting the type of practice, the type of law they do. And with that comes the opportunity to sort of reassess what you want to do. So I think it's critical that we focus on what is it that each individual lawyer needs to make them successful and happy, at our firm. And so that is sort of addressing some of the things I talked about before. But I mean, while money is obviously a key part of any compensation package, for people to keep them at your firm and happy, I think you can't lose sight of the other soft costs and issues. And that might be how what you do for a flex work plan. We have a number of our associates that are on a flex work plan that were on those plans before COVID occurred. And so they're continuing those. It's customized for each person, where you basically say, here's my challenges and here's what I'd like to do in terms of either reduced or just changing the hours. I think we'll find that there'll be more of those cases coming up. I think there will be instances where we will have lawyers who will say, in terms of the remote working, here's how I can work differently. We have a couple of lawyers that currently, spend a fair bit of time working remotely from other cities, and that's worked out. So I think to really manage the retention issue, we have to really listen to our people and see what it is that they're asking for, how we can reallocate resources to provide that. I think we're now starting to get into, for instance, the marketing side of it, where everybody's kind of looked at the fact that for the last 6 months, our schedules haven't been filled with fundraising dinners that you have to go to, but instead, people are looking at, well, what else can I do? How can I connect with my clients, connect with new clients? And so that's another area where we've said to people, we want you to be looking at different ways to market and promote yourself. And it's one thing to say we want you to do that, but you really have to sort of walk the walk as well and provide them with the help and the resources. And I think that's how you do the retention.
So Sherry, same thing with you all, and then with the marketing piece, I was going to get into that with you guys about how has marketing changed, especially for younger attorneys who may not have the network that those of us have been doing this for decades and don't have, can't just pick up the phone and make calls to clients. And so tell me a little bit what you guys are doing.
First of all, I just want to follow up on something that Norm said about retention of talent. And that is, I see our younger attorneys motivated by other than just compensation. Money certainly is a factor, and I think you have to be competitive in your marketplace. But if they really wanted to make big bucks, they could go to Boston or New York, and they would bury our salaries. So there are other factors that they're looking at that are increasingly more important. Family time, paid time off. We have a very generous maternity leave, but now we also have implemented a pretty generous paternity leave as well. And that's been really well received. Flex time, that's another thing, when someone has a baby, that one person may be taking on more of a heavy load than others, and they may need to reduce their time. We allow for that, both for a male or female attorney, to reduce hours and work on a 4-day or even a 3-day work week if that's what they need to do for whatever period of time. Usually we find that by making those accommodations, they are very loyal, and when their circumstances change, they come back full time, and they're even stronger advocates for the firm and what we believe in. So I think a lot of that is something that we have to pay close attention to, and you have to ask them what it is that is important for them, because what's important for me or Norm or Chuck is not the same as someone who's in their early 30s, maybe with a family or maybe not. But so making sure that you're being responsive to the other factors that they look for. Increasingly, they're looking for more social impact. They're looking for firms to be involved in the communities. We actually, more than encourage, we expect all of our attorneys to get involved in the community in one way or another. Find your passion and then volunteer on a board or on a committee, but get involved. And that's another way, frankly, to build your network. It's a little more challenging now because all of those things are remote as well, but they're happening. They're happening. They're having regular meetings. It's generally by Zoom. So a lot of the functions that Norm had referred to about, going out to these events and dinners and luncheons are not happening, but there are still a lot of events online, and they're even getting pretty clever about networking and putting you in little rooms to meet and talk with other folks, which was weird for me the first few times, but I actually am learning to like it a little bit. So, you just have to be creative about that. One more thing that we do in a formal way that is, I think, as important as ever is we ask every attorney to develop a business plan. Who are the clients that you're working on that you want to continue to work on? What are the matters that you'd like to take on? Is there an area of expertise that you would like to gain? Is there an attorney in the office you'd really like to work with? So to be thoughtful about what their business plan is, including community involvement, hours and work schedule. And then we work through that with them when they put it together each year. And then we have a touch base 3 times a year to just go over how's it going. People's business plans change a lot, especially when they're younger and what they think they're going to do, and then they change into something else they find they love more and they want to pursue that. So there's flexibility in that, but there's a discipline to having them actually plan and set goals for the year, and then have older or more experienced attorneys touching base with them and finding out how's it going, what do you need, how can we help. And then we have a review process that's pretty formal that we do a mid-year review and then a annual review to give feedback on how the attorneys they're working with think they're doing. And I think all of that are ways that we touch base and keep connected and make sure that we're hearing what they need and also responding to concerns or issues.
So Sherry, what's the most successful marketing thing or event that you have done in the pandemic that the firm has done?
I don't know that we've done a firm-wide event other than gathering the firm together.
Okay.
We haven't done any outreach for, obviously all of us are still involved in our boards in our communities, and we're doing that. But in terms of the normal events that we would have, hosting people or otherwise, we haven't really done that. It's a good question because we should think about ways to do it more creatively online.
Chuck, what have you guys done?
It's really interesting. We've kind of been talking about two different things. One was about retention and one was about marketing.
Yep.
Both of which I'd like to address, okay? Because I think the marketing one is really interesting. On the retention side, we're like Sherry. If you want to make more money in Bucharest, there are other law firms to go to. But what we do is we certainly get people more involved. You'll have a lot more personal contact. The firm is partner heavy. So you'll have a lot of opportunity to work with people, with partners closely on big projects. And we're pretty family oriented. So we give lots of flex time and lots of, if you have to go to a kid's play or, somebody has to go to the doctor, we're very flexible about these sort of things, which I think is a bit unusual in Romania. I think the Eastern European style is a little more Stalin and a little less flexibility traditionally. So we're very, like I said, very friendly and family oriented. So I think that people think that's important. We've had numerous people leave our firm, work for somebody else, and then within a year or two want to come back and work for us. In fact, that happens enough where it just happened like last week. So in that sort of way, in Moldova, by the way, is a little more interesting. We haven't lost a lawyer in almost a decade. We've added lawyers, but nobody's left the firm. And even we were talking about the other day, like that was shockingly, we didn't even notice hardly. It's like, seriously, no one's left the firm in a decade. And we're still adding to that firm, but we have a lot of retention there. And I think it's a combination of a few things. One is we're one of the bigger law firms in Moldova. It's a very small market, very small town, but we tend to be the big dog in that, our big frog in that minnow pond, so to speak. And so we have a lot of deals. We deal with a lot of things that are interesting. I think that's attractive. I think we pay competitively. But I also think we have a work environment where we're pretty excited about coming to work every day, and we talk about stuff all the time, and we're engaged. We're involved with lots of social things, like Sherry was saying. I think people like that. I think it's unusual in Eastern Europe. Like I said, we tend to run more of a kind of a Western style law firm. So we encourage people to do volunteer work or pro bono. And hey, if you want to do something, you want to work for somebody, that's great. You should do it. So we found that we have a fairly high retention. Interestingly enough, retention was really a problem right before the big crash in 2008, 2009. But we didn't fire anybody after the crash. We kept the salaries the same, not a lot of increases, but we kept the salaries the same, although there were a lot of under pressure. The same for the quarantine. A lot of law firms in town immediately cut lawyer salaries, which we did not. We did not lay anybody off. We didn't do that. And I think that investing in these people, although it was costing the partners some cash to do this, I think really led people to say, hey, we're here to basically get through this all together. We're committed to having you be here today and next month. And I think that that loyalty to a lot of our people has helped us with loyalty back to us. Now, as for I wish I knew some secret sauce to say about loyalty. You know, I mean, money always helps, but I think it also helps to be engaged with a lot of people, and that's what we are. On the other hand, on the marketing side, that's really interesting. The vast majority of our marketing before the pandemic was one-on-one. We pitched a lot of people directly. We had the ability, State Capital Group is a real help, but we have the ability to really reach out to lots of people. We had regular trips to other cities, London a lot. I was in London quite a bit, Paris or Germany and other places, America. And we did a lot of one-on-one retail. And so obviously quarantine has just killed the vast majority of our marketing. In fact, 80% of our marketing budget went to a lot of just one-on-one pitches with people. And we don't have that anymore. So it didn't really have much of an online presence. I mean, we never really thought about it that much. And so we've had to really rejig almost everything that we've did in the past because you just can't get in the room anymore with people. So I'm not sure we've done a particularly good job at that, but we certainly had to refocus this. I don't know if it's as effective as it is doing more of the one-on-one stuff. It turns out, though, we have hidden talents, as you do when you have to do something. One of our partners in Moldova turned out to have a real flair for working a lot of the social networking things, was able to win a lot of clients and pitches and do things. He's been great at it. And I never knew he had any, we never really thought about it, but that's been really sort of a pleasant surprise. He gets a lot of recognition for it, obviously, because we're very proud that he works it very hard to bring in new clients. They've been very successful in Moldova to doing that. So on the marketing side, it's more difficult. I'm not sure we have the right answer yet. I don't think, to be honest, if somebody's going to really, pay us $100,000 for a project, there are only a handful of people who can make that decision on behalf of companies in this part of the world. And it's really better that we have a relationship with them and try to develop that. And it's just more challenging in this environment to do that. We've been lucky so far because we still have some big projects coming in. I wish I knew what the magic sauce was because we still get referrals in, but we're not really doing as much marketing as we did in the past. So I'd be curious about what you guys are doing because I'd really like to figure out what the next step is when we reconsider our marketing plan at the end of the year.
Yeah, we've tried to be more targeted in some of the marketing. So taking advantage of platforms like this where you can do something for potential clients. We have a young lawyer who practices in our estates group, and she said early on, the number of referrals she was getting from people who were worried and said, I want to update my will. What do I need to do for power of attorney for my elderly parents, things like that. So she's developed a program that she does online through Zoom meetings where couples can get sort of a crash course in what are the things they need to look at. So it's a very targeted market thing, and she's one of our associates. What we find is, and we've always encouraged our marketing group and the lawyers that are working and mentoring the young lawyers is just say yes. Like when you get the request from the lawyer with a new idea, the first reaction from a management side is typically what's it going to cost us. But don't say that. Start with yes and see if you can work it out. And you get some really interesting ideas that come out of this and that we've had through the years. The other thing that we found during this time is if there were clients that you did things with historically, we've encouraged our lawyers to go back to them, and our marketing manager, works with them to say, what can we do with your people? So we do a lot of work with financial institutions, with accountants, with other professionals. And so we've reached out to them and said, how can we partner up and do something different? What would that look like? And trying to come up with some ideas. Some of them have been pretty interesting just in terms of trying something different. And I think people are more receptive right now to trying something different. And I think the lawyers who are able to think outside the box and come up with those ideas are the ones that are going to do well going forward. Just trying to think of different things.
Sherry, are you guys is the firm using social media in a different way now that we're in the pandemic than it was pre-pandemic? Like Chuck was saying, people are figuring out they actually have skill sets that we never knew existed. But are you guys using more social media as outreach?
I think individual attorneys are certainly. We've had internal sessions with our attorneys on how to use social media appropriately, what the tools are, what's effective. I think virtually all of our attorneys are on LinkedIn now and trying to develop networks. I think the other thing that people are doing is looking for events, even though they're online, that allow them to connect with and network with um, more industry specific or practice specific, like environmental conferences online or energy programs online. Whereas in the past, frankly, one of our best marketing tools was to go to the conferences of the industry folks, the folks that are working in the area that you want to develop more clients. And those aren't happening. They're happening virtually. And so I think we're using a lot more of our time on virtual meetings, trying to connect with those same industry groups, but it's not as effective as being in person, that's for sure. You have to be creative.
I guess I was saying more or less the same thing. As I'm a little bit interested to see how this is really going to turn out. It's quite different to have a drink at the bar with somebody, and say, hey, where are you from and what do you do? It's much more, you can't get that FaceTime from Zoom. And of course, we do a lot of compliance work, and a couple of three of us actually are certified compliance officers, and we just got accepted to do a presentation at their conference, which we thought would be held in person next spring. But they've already decided that next spring they're going to do it online, which we were like, we were really hoping to do this live, because we're doing it on generational issues like millennials and iGeners or something, and we were going to kind of be funny about it, of all the different things that everybody does. But it's hard to online to even express that sort of sense of humor. It's hard to understand when you tell a joke, whether it killed or whether people are like, oh, that's horrible. Get off the phone, Grandpa. So, it's sometimes it's a challenge. I haven't quite figured out the feel for how this works. And so I'm curious over time whether I'll feel better about it, I guess, or whether I feel more that it's working somehow.
Well, are you guys doing anything to help lawyers? Because it is very different to hold a hearing, have a meeting, do a conference call on screen, Zoom, than, as you were saying, in person. Because in person, you can kind of feed off the energy in the room. You can feed off the energy of the judge or the magistrate or whoever it is you're in front of, or even opposing counsel, right? Like you can kind of feed off that energy, and you don't get that online. It's more scripted, and things have to be done in a way that if a judge has a question, it's almost like, how do you get to that question in the middle of your PowerPoint when you're working through slides to get to a certain place? So are you guys taking any steps? Are you doing anything to help train your lawyers on how to effectively use Zoom or Microsoft Teams meeting or something?
We've done some of that, both with our lawyers and our staff. Our continuing sort of knowledge and continuing legal education groups have done surveys with our staff and our lawyers to say, what are some of these challenges that you're dealing with technologically and otherwise? And then we've done Zoom sessions and some in-person sessions where you have like 2 people in our training room, which holds 15, just to spread people out. But dealing with specific topics, and some of them are very specific. It's, shortcuts for using our document management system, some tips for setting up and using Zoom, Skype, and Teams meetings. So doing exactly that. I find through all this, we're more concerned about making sure that people are getting the help they need and asking them those questions. So I'm hopeful that as we move forward on this, we'll keep that, and we'll keep continuing to do that, where you say, what can we help you with?
We've had our admin staff they've all been working remotely as well, but they have been remarkable. They've always been better at technology, I think, than certainly my generation of attorneys. And so they just jumped into, very enthusiastically. They set all of our billing professionals up on Zoom with a picture and gave little remote training on how it worked and how to have it happen. And then they were available. There were three of them in particular that really are very, very good at it. And so by nature, we just tend to say, hey, Celeste, can you help us with how to do what's this team meetings thing, or what's ring circus thing, and they're great at showing us how to set it up, how to get it downloaded, have it on your system, how you can use your computer, you can use your iPhone. So we've had some pretty strong support that way. We have not had a firm-wide training on how to use Zoom effectively, or how to litigate or do a deposition effectively by Zoom, but there have been, through practice groups, those kinds of conversations are going on, where, for example, the litigation group, everything is remote now, pretty much, and all the depositions are remote. It'll be interesting to see if that continues after COVID disappears, because it's, on the one hand, it's not as effective as being in the room. On the other hand, you're eliminating days of travel to get to some place for a deposition. And clients may say, we're not going to pay for you to travel there anymore. We want you to do it remotely. It'll be interesting to see, but those practice groups have been sharing their tips on how to be more effective, but it's not happened on a firm-wide basis.
Where courts are still open.
Yeah.
The idea that some Romanian court's going to have the ability to actually have something, I'd love to see that. So no, we're doing this. We're doing this the old-fashioned way.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
We're just thankful people wear masks, to be honest. So it's
one of the things that we've found and that I've found helpful, and this is my plug for SCG Legal, is having forums and opportunities where you can talk to lawyers in other cities, other places, other size of firms, and say, what are you doing? Like, how are you figuring this out? What are you doing? So like in Canada, we have a monthly meeting of the various Canadian firms, and during COVID, it's turned into, to a fair degree, saying, what's going on in your province? How have you dealt with these different things? So, I've encouraged people before, and would do it and continue to say, reach out to people that you've met through SCG and say, how are you guys dealing with some of these things? Because there's a lot of great ideas out there when you start listening to other people, right?
No, that's exactly right. And that's why we put these forums together for folks. All right. So, Chuck, what is the one thing that will forever be altered by the pandemic? And is it positive or negative in the practice of law?
Wow. That's wow. That's a question that has definitely changed, pro or con. Wow. Yeah, that's really a good question. I'm not sure I got a good answer. Boy, you left me stumped with that one. I think that, we are still one of the old-fashioned guilds, to be honest. I mean, bar is one of the old professions that we have. We find it to be very people-oriented in a lot of ways. And I'm not sure how law is ever, you sort of like, I wonder, are we really that different than Thomas Jefferson, really, except maybe we have better writing utensils? I mean, we've always had this profession that requires us to think through these different problems. We have the same sort of legal arguments, we can almost say almost exactly the same for centuries. And I'm not sure if that's ever going to really change in sort of ways. I think the way we do business will. I think that, for instance, we were in Washington. I was saying when we had our panel, my law firm is 80% female. And we think it's even going to get more female in the future. I mean, law is becoming really more female dominated than male dominated. I mean, that's just the facts. More women are going to law school, more graduating. So I wonder, like these trends that are occurring seem to still be occurring. I don't know if those trends are going to be different than they were because of the pandemic at all. I think the flexibility that law firms are showing now will probably stay. I think that as Norm and I were joking before, the casualness of law, I think, will also change because of this. So there'll be more flexibility, and I think we'll be a little bit more casual. That's been happening for a long time. I think we would all agree that the dress code I had when I started law is quite different than what the dress code is now. The fact I can wear a pink tie is in itself a change. So I think in those sort of ways, these trends are all going. I think what COVID did is put some of these trends on steroids, so to speak. It's really accelerated a lot of these trends. We were already kind of heading in that direction, but I think that we will have to provide more flexibility. There will be things that are asked about, can I have young kids, can I work from home for a while, for a year or two? Yeah, of course. So I think that we're going to have to be more flexible. I'm not sure if that's radically different, but I think that is probably here to stay.
Sherry, what do you think?
Well, I wonder sometimes, I mean, when I started out as a lawyer with Superfund, we used to have these meetings in Boston, and there'd be like 20 or 30 attorneys in the room, and we'd spend an hour and a half, maybe not an hour and a half, but a long time just shuffling around the table, talking with one another. And then finally you settle down and you spend an hour or so of business, and a good part of the day is gone. Now, obviously, that's not happening any longer. Those meetings are by Zoom. I find that people get down to business pretty quickly. There's still a little bit of banter, but much more reduced. And frankly, it's far more cost effective for our clients to have those types of meetings remotely, where everyone shows up on a screen and you get your work done. You're not traveling to there or back. You're not spending the time it takes, shuffling your papers before things get started. And I think that's here to stay. There are going to be times, certainly, when an in-person meeting is really important. But I think we're going to find that clients are going to be more demanding about being efficient with our time, with our meetings, not spending the time traveling to meetings. For better or worse, I think we're going to see that remaining after COVID. The other thing I would say is I used to do a lot by telephone conference, and now everybody seems to want to do it by Zoom instead. I personally think, what's wrong with the telephone? But I think, in my view, for worse, we're going to end up doing a lot more Zoom calls in the future than telephone conference calls, for better or worse.
Norm, what do you see?
I would agree with both Sherry and Chuck. And Chuck, I think you nailed it on your comment about some of these trends are now on steroids. I think we were moving in that direction already, and this has really accelerated it. So, as an example, when I started out, senior partners had the big, offices with the sofa and the mahogany. And we've moved away from that already to, when we moved into our new premises, they were specifically designed where all the offices were the same size, both associates and partners, because we recognized that our clients didn't really care what we had for offices. Their focus was on delivering the service that they wanted. And so I think we're going to find, and we are finding, that this has really accelerated that whole process. We're finding that, clients are quite happy having us work remotely in a lot of instances, having us work flexibly, where you're talking to clients at different times of the day of the week, depending on schedules. People are much more understanding of that. So I think that sort of flexibility in the way we deliver our services, it has been accelerated by this whole process. And that's where I was saying before, I don't think we're going to reverse that trend. I think it's going to continue to go that way. if I had a hope for what comes out of this, I would hope that all the things that were talked about doing in terms of being, concerned about our lawyers' well-being and their mental health and asking people, how are you doing? What can we do to help you? I hope that stays. I hope that our concern with, delivering to each lawyer sort of what they personally need to do, I hope we continue to do that and don't just sort of revert back to, okay, things are back to normal, do your own thing, because I think that's been a really good thing.
No, thank you guys. I appreciate this. We've been talking now for a while, but and I think your insights are incredibly helpful to other folks. I mean, I've been listening, taking some notes while you guys were talking. I'll steal some of your ideas, but thank you so much for agreeing to do this for SCG Legal.
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate you moderating this and thinking of all the good questions. So thanks very much. It's really great to see all of you. I look forward to seeing you in person one of these days soon, I hope.
At a minimum, San Francisco. Beyond that.
Yeah, if we're not in the same room a year from now, I'm going to be really disappointed.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together, Celeste, and Diane and everybody at SCG Legal as well. Great to see all of you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Celeste. It's been a pleasure, and I enjoyed my time with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
And that concludes our recording. Thank you for joining us today. You can find this and many other episodes at scgglobalspin.com.